Sad news to report out of Mexico, but the historic Montaña Rusa wooden roller coaster at La Feria de Chapultepec in Mexico City is closing, and unfortunately, it will be demolished. In this video, I'll talk about the coaster's removal and provide my review of the coaster. Montaña Rusa was the heart and soul of La Feria de Chapultepec. For the most part, this amusement park felt like a permanent fun fair. But there was one notable exception in Montaña Rusa. This hulking Mobius wooden roller coaster dominated the park's skyline. You could see it from anywhere in the park. In fact, it took up almost half the park by itself. La Feria de Chapultepec had been standing but not operating ever since a fatal accident occurred on Quimera on September 28, 2019. The root cause of the accident was determined to be poor maintenance by the park, and the investigation determined several other maintenance issues with La Feria in general. The park had been operated by Ventura Entertainment ever since 2015, but the Mexican government revoked the park's operating license after their investigation. The park had sat idle for the past year while the government sought out a new operator. Industry leaders such as Six Flags, Cedar Fair, and SeaWorld were contacted, but the COVID-19 pandemic delayed the park's sale. In late November 2020, a new operator was identified in Thor Urban Capital. Looking at their portfolio, Thor Urban Capital, this will be their first amusement park. The company operates a mix of entertainment, retail, and hotel properties currently. But unfortunately, this announcement was bittersweet. In the plans Thor Urban Capital released for their revitalized La Feria, Montaña Rusa was nowhere to be found, and it was shared that Montaña Rusa would be demolished due to the coaster's deteriorated condition. And this was sad to hear for sure. Montaña Rusa may not have been an elite wooden roller coaster anymore, but it was a historically significant ride. The coaster was designed by the National Amusement Device Company, and when it opened in 1964, it was the world's tallest roller coaster, standing 110 feet tall, or 33.5 meters tall. But the coaster is more notable for two reasons. One, it was the last remaining wooden roller coaster in all of Mexico. Two, it was a rare Mobius wooden roller coaster. This meant that the coaster consisted of two continuous tracks that combined to form a single circuit or Mobius loop. Montaña Rusa was one of three remaining Mobius loop wooden roller coasters, along with Kennywood's Racer and Blackpool Pleasure Beach's Grand National. Because La Feria de Chapultepec was literally located in the heart of downtown Mexico City, the coaster was a thing of legend. It was arguably the most famous roller coaster in all of Mexico. However, the coaster's historical significance wasn't enough to save it from being targeted for demolition. Even before the Quimera accident and fallout from the subsequent investigation, it was clear that Montaña Rusa had seen better days. Many who rode the coaster over the past decade found the coaster quite rough. But even worse, the park no longer raced Montaña Rusa. The rumor I heard was that it was to reduce wear and tear in the structure by cycling less trains, and when they did need to run two trains, they wouldn't pass over the same section simultaneously. Considering Montaña Rusa has 4,000 feet of track, or 1,219 meters of track on each side, Montaña Rusa's combined track length exceed that of even the Beast at Kings Island. That sheer length, combined with the coaster's age and Mexico City's demanding climate, could not have made it easy to maintain this coaster. But unfortunately, it sounds like the damage that was done during Ventura Entertainment's ownership of the park was permanent. Or the park just didn't want to invest the money to fix the ride. I visited La Feria twice, once in 2018 and once in 2019. I have a separate review for the park as a whole, but in short, I did not have the best experience at this park. In my first visit, many rides opened late, Montaña Rusa included. And in my second visit, almost every major ride was closed, Montaña Rusa included. As a result, I only got one ride in Montaña Rusa, and I consider myself very fortunate to have done so. What should have been a capacity monster with its dual-track design was a capacity nightmare. The coaster usually ran just one train, and it had a pitifully slow dispatch each time. Combined with a station-to-station time of almost 4.5 minutes, you can see how this coaster's line would move at a snail's pace. Thankfully, I got the second to back row for my one ride. I was able to avoid the wheel seat and get the back car, where I heard this coaster had some nice airtime. And one other operational oddity, the park did not allow me to wear my glasses on the coaster. That in itself is a nuisance, but not unique to La Feria. What was weird is that they wouldn't allow me to keep my glasses on the ride platform. They told me to hold them in my hand. I found that sort of weird because they were a lot less secure in my hand than they would have been around my head with a glasses strap, but that was the park's policy. In terms of the trains themselves, they felt similar to 3-bench PTCs. They were extremely well padded, something I'd later be thankful for, and they had individual ratcheting lap bars. I don't recall the operators at La Feria pushing the lap bar down very far, so I had a decent amount of room. Montagna Russa began with one of the worst pre-lifts of any coaster. It wasn't rough, just painstakingly slow and boring. It took roughly a minute once you were dispatched to reach the lift hill. But it set the stage for the lift hill, which took equally as long. It took another minute to ascend the 110-foot tall, or 33.5 meter tall lift. But thankfully, the lift at least gives awesome views of Mexico City, La Feria, and the dense structure of Montagna Russa itself. But the snooze fest continues with Montagna Russa's first drop. It's extremely shallow and probably no more than 20 to 25 feet, or 6 to 8 meters in size. It goes without saying you won't get any airtime on this drop. That's followed by an extremely slow turnaround reminiscent of the flat turn on the Grizzly coasters at Kings Dominion and California's Great America. But at least this turn gives you another opportunity to take in Mexico City's impressive skyline. I believe the second drop is the ride's largest at 80 feet or 24 meters. But unfortunately, it's another fairly shallow drop, so it didn't offer any airtime. At least it finally gave the coaster some speed. It just took 2.5 minutes to do so. This was also the first high-speed valley of the coaster, and while it was certainly bumpy, it wasn't unbearable. In the row I experienced Montagna Russa, I'd say the roughness was on par with Coney Island Cyclone, so not smooth, but tolerable. Although I suspect it would have been much worse in the very back on a wheel seat. At this point, I was wondering if the reports that this coaster had airtime were incorrect. But then the third drop happened, and holy guacamole, did that drop catch me off guard. This drop had an extremely tight crest, and it was super steep, unlike the first two drops. So I was thrown over in the back car, and treated to some serious ejector airtime. It was probably the best single airtime moment in all of Mexico. Yes, it was even better than any single moment on Medusa or Superman. And the valley was equally as rough as the prior one, so it wasn't too bad. All of the following valleys on this coaster were no rougher than this, presumably because they were taken with less speed. While I never rode this coaster up front, I suspect front row riders would have gotten an abrupt pop of airtime as well atop this hill, considering the sharpness of the crest and the speed at which you took the hill. Plus in POVs you can hear the upstop wheels. Montagna Russa then climbed up another sizable hill. I suspect this hill is probably another one where you would have gotten a little pop of airtime if you were in the front row. This hill is followed by a shallow little dip, much like the first drop, that offers no airtime for those in the back. You then rise up into the second turnaround and are trimmed ever so slightly by a brake. And I found it sort of funny that this wooden coaster that was crawling at this point had a trim brake installed, yet the Schwarzkopf looper next door had its brake runs removed and was allowed to haul through its course far faster than designed. Montagna Russa then lulled me into a false sense of security. The drop off the second turnaround was another shallow drop devoid of airtime. And the following Camelback was another hill that had a shallow little dip on the other side. So at this point, I was thinking Montagna Russa was a one-trick pony. But then it threw two more steep drops at me back to back that I couldn't see coming. These two drops are tucked deep within the coaster's structure, and both gave strong pops of ejector airtime in the back. They probably weren't as sustained as the third drop, but they were still quite strong. Montagna Russa then rose up into the third turnaround, and I suspect this is another hill that gave an abrupt pop of airtime if you were riding up front. Again, if you watch the POV I'm showing on the screen, you will hear the upstop wheels entering this hill. You then charged around another flat turnaround, except this one had more speed than the first two, so it offered a pinch of laterals. Then came the finale. The drop off the turnaround gave a faint pop of airtime in the back since you took it with a decent head of speed. The following bunny hill was unfortunately too shallow to offer any airtime, but the final hill offered one last pop of airtime in the back. You then rose up into the brake run, and then took another 45 to 60 seconds to reach the station. In the end, the Montagna Russa that I experienced was a very uneven one. The coaster had 3 drops with some crazy ejector airtime, but this coaster's pacing was putrid. Most of the ride was spent slowly lumbering about, traveling down shallow drops, or crawling around glacial turnarounds. Had the coaster actually been racing, these slower spots would not have been as much of an issue, but the version of Montagna Russa that I experienced obviously was not racing. So what would I rate Montagna Russa? I would give this coaster a 6.5 out of 10. The third drop and 2 before the third turnaround gave amazing ejector airtime in the back, that's for sure. But outside of an okay finale, the rest of the ride was really dull and uneventful. Thankfully, the coaster wasn't all that rough, at least in the second to back. So ultimately, I'd say this was a slightly above average wooden roller coaster, albeit one of the worst paced ones out there. It always pains me to see a historic roller coaster bite the dust. And if you told me a year ago that Chimera would be saved and Montagna Russa would be the one that got scrapped, I would have had a hard time believing you. But if one ride was going to be saved from La Feria, Chimera was objectively the far better coaster. I just wish there was a way for Montagna Russa to be saved considering its historical significance, but that does not appear likely as crews have already been seen around the coaster. And the new site plans show no traces of Montagna Russa, and instead show at least 1 or 2 other roller coasters coming to La Feria, but they will be on a much smaller scale. So those are my thoughts on Montagna Russa at La Feria de Chapultepec. What are your thoughts about the coaster's removal? Did you ever ride it? I would love to hear what you think down in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate if you gave it a like, and you considered subscribing, because there'll be a lot more roller coaster and amusement park videos here at Canopy Coaster. Thanks for watching.